Hey everybody, Blaine here for Bridgeport Games. Did you know that over in Japan, Bulbasaur is actually called Fushigi-Dane instead of the name we all know and love here in the US? While here in the US it's Bulb and Dinosaur put together, over in Japan the name actually means mysterious seed. And that's the first of 15 amazing facts about Bulbasaur I'm going to tell you today. Hello everybody, as I said in the intro there, I'm Blaine for Bridgeport Games. Thank you for clicking on the video, and welcome to a facts video here at Bridgeport Games. Today we're actually going to be talking about the very first Pokemon in the Pokedex, Bulbasaur, as well as its evolutions, Ivysaur and Venusaur, and some really awesome facts about the Pokemon family. So I'm not going to keep you any longer, we're going to go ahead and get started, but before I do, I just want to take a second to ask if you like the videos we have here on the channel, please make sure you actually like them by hitting that thumbs up button, and of course consider subscribing to the channel to become part of our amazing Pokemon community to make sure that you never miss any of the awesome videos like this one. Alright, that being said, we know Bulbasaur was the first grass starter Pokemon, right? Well, there's also some things about it that make it pretty unique. For one, it's also the only starter in the entire game that also has the poison typing. And on top of that, because it was actually the first starter Pokemon ever for the grass typing, it's a pretty memorable mon. And as such, people love hitting it with merchandising. In fact, when Funko got the license to make Pokemon Pops, Pikachu was obviously the first one to be considered, but after that, it was Bulbasaur, who was the second Pokemon ever to be rendered in Funko Pop. But alright, this is a lot of pressure for just one Pokemon, so let's take a second and talk about Ivysaur. So did you know that Ivysaur is actually one of the oldest Pokemon ever made? Concepts for Ivysaur date all the way back to Capsule Monsters, back then known as Capumon, in which some images are seen of an Ivysaur fighting a Gengar and sometimes a Nidorino. Now ultimately that concept would be reworked into Pokemon, and Ivysaur would lead to the creation of Venusaur, who then in turn would lead to the creation of Bulbasaur. But we're going to stick with Ivysaur for a few minutes because there's a lot of things that actually make it very unique. Now, did you ever notice that Ivysaur is sometimes depicted as walking on its hind legs and sometimes it's depicted as walking on all fours? Back in Pokemon Red and Green, and ultimately the art being redone in Pokemon Red and Blue, Ivysaur was often seen walking on two legs, with every depiction since then showing it walking on all fours. This is actually explained in the Pokedex by saying that as Ivysaur ages, its flower on its back grows larger. Ultimately, it loses the ability to walk on its hind legs due to the extra weight from the flower. So when it first evolves from a Bulbasaur, it's no big deal. That thing can walk on its hind legs all the time because it really is light as a feather. But as it gets ready to become a Venusaur, it's forced down into all fours because it just can't handle how heavy that flower has become. And speaking of Ivysaur being a bit unique in its family, Bulbasaur and Venusaur both have natural habitats in grasslands. However, Ivysaur has its natural habitat in grassy plains. That's because Ivysaur needs more direct sunlight to help it evolve into Venusaur. And on top of that, Ivysaur is unique for one other reason too. It's one of the only Pokemon that has never actually lost on screen in the Pokemon anime. That's right, Ivysaur has a perfect undefeated record for every single one of its appearances in the anime. Alright, but now let's take a second and evolve our starter one step further and talk about Venusaur. So did you know that Venusaur was actually one of the original mascots for Gen 1? That's right, over in Japan, the original games were actually Pokemon Red and Pokemon Green. So obviously the mascot for Pokemon Red was Charizard, but the mascot for Pokemon Green was Venusaur. Now, the games were ultimately remade into Pokemon Blue, where we got Blastoise from, and when it was chosen to be released internationally, Red and Blue were chosen as the colors for the games to give it more international appeal. Therefore, unfortunately, Venusaur was dropped in favor of Blastoise. But don't worry, Venusaur got its time to shine eventually. Back in Gen 3, the Gen 1 games were remade into Fire Red and Leaf Green. Charizard stayed the mascot, but now, with Green being back, Venusaur became the mascot, and we all got to see the revamped version of the original Japanese games, with Venusaur in its rightful place as a mascot. But we still have lots to talk about with Venusaur. Did you actually know that Venusaur is one of the Pokemon that actually shows a gender difference on its sprites? Back in Gen 4, Pokemon was really toying with the idea of giving every single Pokemon a gender difference between its male and female forms. Now in the case of Pokemon like Rattata or Gyarados, it meant longer whiskers. The same is true of Alakazam and Hypno. However, Venusaur gets a very unique trait. So when we see a male Venusaur, it's kind of pictured the way you always think of it. It has a big tree on its back and a nice kind of indent on the top. However, if we have a female Venusaur, on top of that tree is a big seed. Now this is actually done deliberately to mirror how real-world plants work. Female strain plants actually produce the seed that will allow the plant to grow, whereas male strain seeds actually produce the pollen to fertilize the seed. Unfortunately though, this really cool feature doesn't actually show up on Mega Venusaur or if Venusaur has Gigantamaxed. Now let's take a second and talk about a bad reason why Venusaur is actually famous. So back in Gen 5, players finally got access to the GTS, which allowed them to trade Pokemon worldwide. Now, obviously Pokemon doesn't want any Pokemon with offensive nicknames to be traded, so there's a filter list of words that are going to be blocked, and if any Pokemon is nicknamed that, they won't be able to be traded. Now, for some reason, Venusaur's name set off those triggers back in Gen 5, and it was something they were never able to actually resolve. So during Black, White, Black 2, and White 2, Venusaur, Ivysaur, and Bulbasaur couldn't be traded on the GTS, and nobody really knows why. Alright, but now let's take a second and talk about what Venusaur actually is. So if we look at the name, we see Venus and Saur, meaning like a Venus flytrap and a dinosaur. And honestly, Venusaur actually bears a striking resemblance to a real-world dinosaur called a Periosaur. However, that being said, Venusaur is actually not based on a dinosaur at all, and if you've ever played Pokemon Let's Go Eevee and Pikachu, you will know exactly what Venusaur is. It's a frog. It is a hoppy boy, and when it runs around, it hops exactly like a frog. Now, obviously, this has been speculation on the part of the fans for years. However, in an interview, Game Freak developers and artists who work on Venusaur actually confirmed that the inspiration behind the Pokemon was, in fact, a frog. But talking about dinosaurs for a second, did you know that there's actually a real-world dinosaur called a Bulbasaurus? Now, a lot of people think it's named after Bulbasaur because, well, obviously, but in fact, it's actually just a really amazing coincidence. Bulbasaurus is named because of the nose of the dinosaur being very bulbous. And the scientists and research groups who actually study the fossils of the Bulbasaurus have tried very hard to make sure that it is known that there is no connection between the two. But believe it or not, that's not actually where the similarities between Bulbasaurus and actual Bulbasaur end. So one species of Bulbasaurus is actually famous for having razor-sharp keratin-covered teeth. It actually is the namesake for the dinosaur. Now, the actual way to pronounce it in its native language is pretty difficult to pronounce, but when you translate it to English, do you know what it's called? Razor leaf. Now, hopping back into the biology of these two Pokemon, the bulb on the back of Bulbasaur is actually either an onion or a lily. The root forms of both look pretty similar, so it's kind of hard to tell which one is which. But what about Venusaur? Well, the flower on its back is actually called the Rafflesia arnoldi, and it's actually one of the native flowers to Indonesia. Now, these real-world flowers can grow very massive in size, and many times they're actually red with white spots. Does that sound familiar? Well, it should, because it's actually the flower that also inspired Vileplume. And now that we know about this connection between Venusaur and Vileplume, let's take a second to figure out all the similarities that Bulbasaur and Venusaur have with other Pokemon in the franchise. Now, Bulbasaur, Ivysaur, and Venusaur are all known as the Seed Pokemon, a distinction that's also given to Sunkern. But if you think that connection's interesting, listen to this. Venusaur actually shares its height, which is 6'7" or 2.0 meters, and its weight at 220.5 pounds or 100 kilograms, and its egg groups, both Monster and Grass, with Gen 3's Grass and Flying type Pokemon, Tropius. So are these two Pokemon secretly related? Well, it's not for me to call, but they definitely have a ton of similarities in common. So there you have it, everybody. 15 awesome facts about Bulbasaur and its evolutionary line. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you were able to use it to learn a lot more about the very first Pokemon in the National Pokedex. So that being said, everybody, if you did enjoy the video, please make sure that you absolutely impact that like button in the face, and as always, consider subscribing to the channel to become part of our amazing Pokemon community to make sure that you never miss any of the awesome videos like this one. That being said, everybody, I've been Blaine from Bridge4 Games. Thank you so much for stopping by and hanging out with me. Remember that the best Pokemon games are the ones that you love to play, and the proper ways to play them are however you have the most fun. To all of our amazing viewers watching over in Ukraine, please remember that you're always in our thoughts, and as always, please try to stay safe because that is what matters the most. And as always, I hope each and every one of you have a happy, epic, awesome, and amazing day, and I will see you in the next video. See you around. Bye-bye.